Welcome to the CEC Report. It's the 14th of August. I'm Robert Barwick and I'm joined today by CEC leader Craig Isherwood. Welcome, Craig.
Yeah, thanks, Robbie.
In this week's CEC Report, Obama and Abbott's attack on Syria is another war based on a lie. And Commbank is the biggest problem gambler in Australia's casino economy. So first, Obama and Abbott's attack on Syria is another war based on a lie. Now, Craig, the main feature of this week's CEC report is actually going to be the financial system and the economy, which we've got some pretty dramatic new information about. However, we need to start on this subject because, of course, the economic collapse that we've talked about for a long time we have identified is what's driving the world towards war. And you and Elisa covered this last week as well. We've had a lot more to say on it this week. I just want to give another predicate that is a part of the driver for war, which is very dangerous. It came up yesterday when one of the Abbott government's backbenchers went on television to talk about how Australia needs to be part of actually going in and attacking Syria as part of our supposed war on ISIS, right? And then Abbott came out and tried to sort of couch things in the same language that, you know, we're in this existential battle with with ISIS. ISIS is out to get us, and that is leading us to Syria. Now, of course, the problem with this is it's all based on a fraud. But just to remind people what Syria is, and for the long-term viewers of the CEC report, they'd know, and the people who read our press releases, they'd know, because we have been banging on about this Syria issue for years. Syria, when the our Anglo-American allies talk about Syria, Craig, it's only because Syria is a proxy for Russia, right? It hosts the biggest Russian naval fleet outside of Russia itself, and that's why it was the next target after they toppled Gaddafi in Libya, move on to Syria. But of course, it all fell apart in Syria because very quickly what you saw was the people that we were allying with in Syria, as we said on this program repeatedly, hello, we're now fighting with Al-Qaeda, right? At the same time, our soldiers were in Afghanistan being killed by Al-Qaeda. We are fighting with we're proposing to fight with Al-Qaeda in Syria, and you couldn't get away from that. But the government tried to say, no, we're going to, this Assad is so bad, he's so terrible, he's butchering his own people, we've got to have regime change, we've got to topple him. And it nearly came to World War III back in 2012-13 when Obama, if people remember, wanted to bomb Syria over the use of chemical weapons.
That was at this time of the year, Robbie, in August, when the Congress had risen.
Yeah.
And he thinks that he can just do whatever he likes whilst Congress is not around. Fortunately, because of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dempsey, at that time, warning Obama, he basically said, look, we've got everything in place, but if you do this, this is going to be a disaster. And there was other people at that particular time that campaigned against it.
And the other obstacle became the UK Parliament,
yes,
because they had a vote on it, and I was surprised. The outcome was a surprise because they voted no.
Yeah. And
that helped pull the rug out from under it. But people should appreciate just how that could have been a trigger for World War III back then. Anyway, since then, of course, you've had the rise of ISIS. And now what's dangerous is ISIS, which is the Islamic State in Iraq, and if it's ISIS, Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. If they say ISIL, it's Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant, which basically means Syria, Lebanon, etc. ISIS is now the excuse, it's got a stronghold in Syria. Yeah, well, thanks to who? But anyway, it's got a stronghold in Syria. We have to bomb ISIS in Syria. And what Obama is proposing, Craig, which is very dangerous, is establishing a no-fly zone under the pretext in Syria, under the pretext of stopping ISIS. The problem is, if he establishes a no-fly zone in Syria, that will take away the only advantage that Syria's government has over ISIS and the other rebels, which is their air force, right? And that's a calculated ploy by him to do that, because of course, A, his main target is Assad, the president, and B, this is the key bit, ISIS itself is nothing but a creation of the United States, the United Kingdom, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and those countries that have long been gunning for regime change in Syria. They created ISIS. Now, a month or two ago, we reported on this program about Defense Intelligence Agency, US Defense Intelligence Agency documents came out that showed in 2012, the US government was told what's happening now is what our work in Syria is creating is fueling these extremists who want to create an Islamic State. And that will actually be good. This is what the document said. That will actually be good for your tactics against the Assad regime. Well, just to reiterate that point, the former head of the DIA, the US Defense Intelligence Agency, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, he gave an interview with Al Jazeera on the 29th of July. And he said that the rise of ISIS, which is the biggest bugaboo in the world right now, the rise of ISIS was not an intelligence failure, he said, but a willful decision, quote unquote, willful decision. When he was questioned by Al Jazeera, the journalist Hassan said, you are basically saying that even in government at the time, this is 2012, you knew these groups were around. You saw this analysis and you were arguing against it, but who wasn't listening? And Lieutenant General Flynn said, I think the administration, that's the Obama administration. Hassan said, so the administration turned a blind eye to your analysis? Flynn said, I don't know they turned a blind eye. I think it was a decision. I think it was a willful decision. So of course, Craig, if Tony Abbott wants to go after the source of ISIS, he has to declare war on the United States, United Kingdom, Saudi Arabia and Turkey, as I said. But as we said last week, this is another, we talked about the drive for World War III. This is another part of that, right?
Yeah, Robbie, Abbott has to go and support the idea of releasing the secret 28 pages that show that it was the Saudis, the funding of the Saudis through the UK and various networks.
If you're serious about fighting terrorism.
That's right. We don't want to launch a war against the United States, but we do want to launch a war to find out what the truth is about how this organisation was brought about through the funding mechanisms, which is what we've been talking about in our publications. Robbie, the danger here is that, as you said, this can escalate very quickly to World War III because of the involvement of Russia and its close ally.
Well, Russia knows it's a ploy. It's got nothing to do with ISIS.
That's correct.
They created ISIS. It's a ploy.
So we've got these various flashpoints around the world, and we've been campaigning this very vigorously for many years now about stopping World War III. And from time to time, it comes to a flashpoint. We're at that right now. The problem we have is that the Obama administration is a loose cannon. There's no checks and balances in the US at the present time. The Congress is not sitting. For a start.
August, they're on holidays again.
They've gone. So at this time, historically, you've always had the guns of August. World War I was started in August. Most wars are started in August. And what we have at the present time is this real danger that some sort of miscalculation or overstepping the sorts of wild war games that are taking place, particularly on the borders of Russia, could lead to some event taking place which becomes unstoppable.
Yeah, you put out a statement about that this week.
Yeah, that's right. It's on our website, Robbie, because I think people should go to our website and read that. Because we're not just... the problem we are is that it's not necessarily that World War III is going to happen by a calculation, but more because of a miscalculation based on the premise in the United States and in other places like Europe that Russia can be destroyed on the basis of a first nuclear strike. Now, Putin has come out this last week and made it very clear that we have a very, very strong second strike capability. In other words,
Russia has a
very strong capability. Now, there's many different flashpoints in the world today, right? You've had 36 retired flag officers in the United States come out and also support the P5+1 agreement with Iran, which is very, very important. Because if you want to stop ISIS, you have to involve Iran, which means in order to be able to solve the question of dealing with ISIS on the ground and so forth, you desperately need to have collaboration between those forces, those same forces in the United States and other parts of the world with Iran. So this is very, very important. But again, there's a real tension inside the United States where this deal may or may not succeed through the Congress and so forth.
Because the neocons are opposed to it.
The neocons, the right-wing faction in the US. You have all these war games taking place, as I said, on the border of Russia. And this is escalated directly by the US. On Tuesday, the US Air Force announced the deployment of a dozen A-10 attack aircraft to Europe to demonstrate the US commitment to the security and stability of Europe. Another excuse, but it's a provocation. And of course the Russians on their side are also responding to this to show that they're not going to be, you just walked over.
Yep.
So you've got Ukraine, you've got the flashpoints that have taken place in Ukraine, the collapse of the Minsk agreements by the Kiev government, not because of the local Donbass region groups, but deliberately because of the Kiev government and the Nazi factions within that. You also have the South China Sea area, Robbie, which is incredibly dangerous at this point of time. You've got major US military activities taking place in that particular region right now, and that's directed at China. But at the end of the day, two things. First of all, we have a collapsing global financial and monetary system, which is getting worse by the minute, and we will talk about it in the next segment. But secondly, the build-up to World War III, right, as I said before, is on the basis that you have a number of nations expressing their right to national sovereignty. Russia, for example, China are the leaders in this, Syria, right? Any nation that stands up for the idea that we want to be a sovereign nation and even align with the BRICS grouping of countries like Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa become targets for the financial oligarchy, that is the financial oligarchy that is, and those who are trying to protect their world financial system, which is disintegrating.
Exactly. So that's exactly what we'll talk about when we come back from the break, Craig. We'll use Australian predicates of the insanity phase we're in of the global financial system. Welcome back to the CEC Report. Commbank is the biggest problem gambler in Australia's casino economy. So this week, the Commonwealth Bank, Australia's biggest bank, announced a new record profit of a little bit over $9 billion. And of course, big chest beating, this is great. These banks are going from strength to strength to strength. But we put out a press release, Craig, just posing the question, how real is this profit? Not because we have access to the accounting department of the Commonwealth Bank, but a number of reasons. One is the Commonwealth Bank's not alone in this. For some reason, the Commonwealth Bank announces its profit in the middle of the year. The other three of the big four announced their profits in October. But you can bet your bottom dollar they're all going to announce record profits as well. And since the global financial crisis, we've had this phenomenon where all the big four banks in Australia have gone on this record profit spree, really, each year bigger and bigger profits than the year before. But so you think, okay, that's a phenomenon that they're going to have close to probably $40 billion combined profit this year. What is the state of the Australian economy that they're making these profits in?
Well, I don't think it can be from interest rates, Robbie, from housing, because they've actually dropped.
Exactly.
In the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, they're down to record lows. So how can you have record profits from record low interest rates? That's what...
That's a relevant question. Though you can bet your bottom dollar that whatever the interest rate is, the bank could still be trying to get its margin. But just put the banks aside for a minute, right? Think about Australia's governments, the federal government and the state governments. What's the state of their revenue in this economy?
Well,
it's through the floor.
If they had the $9 billion, they'd be a lot better off.
They would be a lot better off. But they can't get the revenue from this economy to do what they have to do, right? All the sectors of the Australian economy, Craig, are on their knees, including the big ones such as the mining sector, because the commodity prices have collapsed. So all these indicators show that our economy is very poor. There's official unemployment of 6.3%. That's 800,000 people now. 800,000. There was a collapse in working hours last month of 3.4 million hours worked less last month than the month before, right? This is all relevant to the economy that these banks are extracting these profits from, right? How can this be? Well, we already had a bit of an insight though, Craig, because we know a little bit about the Commonwealth Bank, and I'll just hold it up here, but we'll put it on the screen. Back in 2012, the Commonwealth Bank took a very suspicious decision. It stopped disclosing the figure that it disclosed for 20 years of the full face value of its derivatives obligations. It just stopped disclosing that figure and only kept disclosing what it calls fair value, which is a much smaller amount. So face value of derivatives is the total money that's involved in each derivatives contract, right? And what they will say is, it's a zero-sum game. So for every liability we have also someone at the liability to us, so it cancels each other out, and they give a much smaller figure. But we've been long part of a critique of this, where we say, listen, you might think the theory that's the theory, but when it goes bad, what the problem is, the institutions are on the hook for the full face value. That's why it's a relevant figure, and that's what happened in 2008. So that was our sense. Okay, this is the Commonwealth Bank, remember, right? That took this decision to start hiding its derivatives. And then the other thing, Craig, we thought about was, there's only one area of the Australian economy at the moment that's actually, in terms of activity, in any way matching the bank's profits, which of course is the property markets in Melbourne and in Sydney, right? And they are in a frenzy right now. But the unnerving thing about those property markets is, a little while ago they were the leaders of the pack of the property markets Australia-wide. The whole property market was in a frenzy. The rest of them now, Craig, are now going backwards, right? Especially places like Perth and Adelaide, they are in a hole. But Melbourne and Sydney are still rip-roaring ahead, and in fact going even crazier, we would argue. And it's not based on demand really, because it's not like families buying homes. It's investors. Banks are willing to lend money to investors that have already got a lot of debt, and they're the ones that are buying the homes. So when the banks do this is getting riskier and riskier. Just on the surface, it has to be. But this is where derivatives come in, because the banks then take this risk and say, okay, well, it's not real. We'll just hedge it, right? We will buy a derivatives contract that means that risk can be taken off our books. And then we pointed that out in the press release, and we noted in that press release, Craig, that since the global financial crisis in 2008, not only have Australian banks' profits gone through the roof, but Australian bank total derivatives have gone through the roof, up to $28 trillion. And I have to make a confession here. We were wrong. And the way it works, when we write a press release, we know the figures in general. The figures of derivatives are produced quarterly. So the last quarter figures we had was $28 trillion. And we thought, okay, well, we'll just make that point. There's been a doubling since 2008. And after we released the press release, one of our erstwhile researchers here actually went and double-checked the figures just to see what the latest ones were. And we fell off our chairs. Because in the last quarter, since the 28 trillion figure came out, Australia has seen the greatest single jump in a quarter in derivatives obligations of our banks by $4 trillion. It's now at 32 trillion, right? It's in one quarter. We've never seen a jump like it. Our banks in this last quarter, that is the quarter in which the banks are finalising their profits, etc., have gone nuts.
And these are
in derivative speculation.
And these are instruments that Warren Buffett calls weapons of mass destruction.
Financial weapons of mass destruction.
Financial weapons of mass destruction. You see record profits from the banks, you see record derivatives contracts, and no one's talking about this.
Exactly.
And that's a real worry.
It is a real worry. So we'll take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the things that have to be done to stop it. Welcome back to the CEC Report, where we're talking how Commbank is the biggest problem gambler in Australia's casino economy. And Craig, we'll put it on the screen again. The latest derivatives figures of Australia's banks' combined derivatives exposure in the last quarter has just exploded off the charts. A $4 trillion increase in a quarter, which we've never ever seen before.
These things didn't exist before 1990, Robbie.
Exactly.
This is a deregulation of the financial system whereby money is allowed to be speculated within an economy.
And that means we're a casino.
Well, that's what you do when you go to
Yep.
to a casino, is you speculate on speculation. And the problem is that we have to get back to a regulated system, and there's a global movement, growing global movement for the reintroduction of the principles of Glass-Steagall.
Yes.
In other words, separating out the real economy and the necessity for a strong commercial banking system that is highly regulated and depositors' funds are safe from the investment and the merchant bankers. That is what we have today, where you've got deposits at risk of these financial speculators and merchant bankers.
Now, Craig, Glass-Steagall was repealed in 1999. Its repeal led to the global financial crisis. We've been at the lead of the global campaign to have it reintroduced. But let's just talk quickly about the fact that politically there's an amazing phenomenon happening in front of our eyes, where in the United Kingdom and in the United States, there's elections underway. In the UK, it's for the leadership of the Labor Party. In the United States, it's for the president. The presidential pre-candidates are having their debates, etc. But the candidates that are emphatically in favour of Glass-Steagall they're committed to it. This is their platform, which means they are the enemies of the City of London and Wall Street. They are getting all the support.
Well, Franklin Roosevelt, Robbie, who brought in Glass-Steagall, actually did what was necessary and bankrupted Wall Street.
Yeah.
That's where Glass-Steagall came from. Here we have the Wall Street, we have the international financial oligarchy driving the world's economy through the floor because of this massive speculation in non-productive activity. And that's what's going to happen again.
So if you're a banker at the moment on London and Wall Street, what's terrifying you, we'll put some images on the screen, some pictures on the screen of look at these public meetings that Jeremy Corbyn in the United Kingdom is leading for his campaign. And there's another one of Bernie Sanders, the Democratic presidential candidate. So all you get told in the media is Hillary Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Hillary Clinton. These 26,000 people turned up to this stadium to listen to Bernie Sanders speak, right? And these guys are getting support because public know they are genuine about going after the City of London and the banks.
And I think what also scares them crazy, Rob, is Corbyn has come out and called for quantitative easing for productive purposes. And that's freaked out everyone.
His term is people's quantitative easing.
And that's really quite stark. I mean, because you had 380 billion produced by the Bank of England, right? Literally printed, which they themselves say in their own literature, towards propping up the banking system. What Jeremy Corbyn is saying, as we say this as well, is that you can produce this credit, print this money, providing it's put into the productive economy. It won't be inflationary, but it'll have a massive boost to being able to put people into work, stimulate the economy, and you'll get out of the cycle of horrendous debt and the problems that we have today.
And because they resorted to that, actually creating money in their own words, you can see the writing on the screen there, creating the money to bail out the banks, they don't have an argument against Corbyn when he says, well, create the money to invest in the economy, right? And this is, of course, Craig, what we in the CEC have championed for 25 years, a national bank. And just to finalise this point, because we're running out of time, what was Australia's original national bank, the bank whose investment in the economy is what created the modern Australia we have? The Commonwealth Bank. So this bank, sadly, is now a problem gambler in a casino. If you go into the Commonwealth Bank or any of the banks, all their advertising, Craig, I think should have the warning you see it on the end of gambling ads, right? Warning, gamble responsibly. They should have those, what you see in the toilets of pubs that, now, if you problem gambling, call the Gamblers Helpline. They should have those on the walls of the banks. But let's reclaim the Commonwealth Bank and turn it back into a national bank. But we're running out of time for this. So thanks for tuning in. Tune in next week for more.